You're listening to Beezy Beez Sleep Stories, created for the restless, the curious, and those who find themselves wide awake when the world goes quiet. To listen to more stories like this one, please visit deepbearsleep.com.
Tonight's story, Walking the Lines, a field guide to choosing your life. Let's begin. Chapter 4, Echo Loops. There are some kinds of tension that don't begin in the moment. They begin much earlier, years earlier, sometimes decades. And when they arrive, they don't feel new. They feel familiar. That is what made them powerful. Mara didn't know this yet, not fully. She had noticed the grip. She had started to understand the hallway of doors, the shifting lines, the strange and practical truth that her inner posture changed how the world seemed to meet her. But she still had blind spots, and one of the biggest lived in her family. The text came at 8:12 on a gray Friday morning. From her mother. Call me when you can. It's about your sister. No exclamation point. No all caps. Nothing dramatic on the surface. And still, the words landed inside Mara like a dropped tray. The body knew before the mind did. Her stomach tightened. Her shoulders tensed. A faint heat rose behind her ribs. She was standing in the kitchen with her tea steeping and one earring in her hand, and suddenly the whole morning changed shape. This had happened before. Many times. Not always with this exact sentence, but close enough. There had always been some version of it. Call me. Something's going on with your sister. I don't know what to do. She won't listen to me. Maybe she'll listen to you. Mara leaned against the counter and stared at the phone. The tea bag bobbed in the mug, forgotten. She didn't answer right away. Not because she didn't care, because she cared enough to notice what was happening. Not just the concern, the pattern, the rush of obligation. The old role stepping onto the stage before she had consciously agreed to it. That was the strange thing about these moments. They arrived like facts, but underneath them, they carried an emotional script. And if you weren't watching carefully, you'd start speaking your lines without realizing you were in the play. On the train into the city, Mara kept the text unopened in her mind like a folded note she hadn't fully read yet. Around her, people swayed in the quiet commuter rhythm of the morning. A man in a navy coat sniffed into a paper napkin. A teenage girl reapplied lip gloss using her front-facing camera. A woman with tired eyes stared at nothing and held a lunch bag in both hands like it was keeping her upright. Everyone seemed sealed inside their own weather. Mara looked at her reflection in the window. She had slept well enough. Her hair was pinned back. Her coat was buttoned all the way up to the collar. From the outside, she looked composed. Inside, though, she could feel the beginning of something circular. Not just worry, not quite fear. More like a current she had been dropped into before. A familiar emotional whirlpool. And then, almost as if the thought had been waiting for her to become quiet enough, the phrase arrived. Echo loop. She repeated it silently. Echo loop. That felt right. Because what was happening didn't belong entirely to this moment. This moment was just pressing on an old place. A soft spot in the floor that had been stepped on too many times. The text from her mother had touched something ancient. Not dramatic ancient, not mythical ancient, just personal ancient. The emotional memory of being the stable one, the calm one, the translator, the bridge, the one who could step into the middle and smooth it all over. She was good at that role. That was part of the problem. By the time she got to the office lobby, she had decided to call her mother from the side courtyard, where smokers used to stand before the building banned cigarettes. Now it was mostly decorative planters, 2 benches, and the occasional person talking into a headset like they were negotiating peace between nations. Mara stood near the brick wall, inhaled once, then pressed call. Her mother answered before the first full ring. Mara? Yes, Mom. Oh, good. I didn't want to worry you. Mara closed her eyes for just a second. There it was. The opening move. I didn't want to worry you. Spoken by a woman who had, in fact, done exactly that. But Mara didn't respond to the old cue. She just said gently, "What's going on?" A sigh crackled through the line. "It's your sister." Of course it was. She called late last night. She's upset. She says she's thinking of leaving town again. She says she needs a change. And honestly, I just don't know what to say to her anymore. Mara looked across the courtyard at the concrete planter filled with rosemary and brittle ornamental grass. Leaving town again? That part mattered. Her sister, Elise, had a way of disappearing emotionally before she disappeared physically. A way of making sudden change sound like freedom when sometimes it was just panic dressed up in travel clothes. Still, Mara waited. Because she was beginning to understand that in some conversations, the first layer wasn't the real one. Her mother continued. She sounded tired. She sounded lost. And then she got short with me when I asked basic questions. I told her she can't just keep running every time life gets uncomfortable, but you know how she gets. Mara stayed quiet. And then, her mother added, voice sharpening slightly, she said maybe I'm the reason she wants to go. There it was, not the event, the handoff, the invisible transfer of emotional charge. Now the conversation wasn't just about Elise leaving town. It was about Mara becoming part of the emotional holding system. Soothe your sister. Reassure me. Help me make sense of my feelings. Tell me what to do. The whole family current had come alive in less than 90 seconds. Mara put one hand lightly on her ribs. Not in a dramatic, self-soothing way. Just enough to anchor. She asked the question inwardly, the one that had become her quiet lantern. What line am I on right now? The answer came quickly. The line where someone else's distress becomes my job. Oof! She didn't need to judge it. She knew this line. She had walked it her whole life. The line where her mother's anxiety became the emotional temperature of the room. The line where Elise's chaos recruited everyone into orbit around it. The line where Mara disappeared into competence because somebody had to. And maybe that had helped once. Maybe it had even been necessary. But today, standing in a chilly office courtyard with her phone pressed to her ear, it felt less like love and more like gravity. A loop. An echo loop. One person panics. Another reacts. Someone absorbs. Nobody really rests. Mom, Mara said carefully. I'm sorry she said that. Her mother made a small sound. Relief mixed with indignation. I know she didn't mean it, but honestly, Mara, I'm tired. There it was again. The invitation to step all the way in. Mara could almost feel the old roll sliding over her shoulders like a coat someone else handed her. But this time, she didn't put it on. Instead, she softened her voice and stayed specific. I can hear that you're tired, she said, and I care. But I don't want to become the middle here. Silence. A longer silence than before. Her mother didn't explode. She didn't hang up. She simply didn't answer right away. And Mara realized how unusual that was. The old loop expected immediate emotional participation, instant reassurance, shared agitation. Instead, Mara had offered something different. Care without collapse. Connection without enmeshment. It was such a small shift in words. And yet, inside her, it felt enormous. Her mother finally spoke. I'm not asking you to be in the middle. The sentence was familiar enough that Mara nearly smiled. Not because it was false, because it was automatic. The loop speaking through someone who didn't know there was a loop. I know, Mara said gently. but I want to be careful. Another pause. Then her mother exhaled. Well, I suppose that makes sense. Mara looked up at the sky between the buildings. It was pale and overcast and very ordinary. And still, she felt something subtle happen inside her. A click. Not resolution, not mastery. Just a loop that had not completed itself in the usual way. That mattered. Back upstairs at her desk, Mara opened her notebook and wrote the phrase at the top of a blank page. Echo loops. Then beneath it, invisible emotional patterns that repeat when no one notices them. She underlined it once, then again. The page filled quickly after that. She wrote, "When someone sounds disappointed, I assume I've done something wrong. When someone is upset, I feel responsible for helping them regulate. When tension rises, I get smaller. When someone withdraws, I start searching for what I did. When a problem appears, I step forward before checking whether it's mine." She stared at the list. None of it was new. That was the sobering part. It had all been there for years. The loops didn't hide because they were complicated. They hid because they were familiar. Familiar enough to feel like truth. At 11:10, Lena came by carrying 2 coffees. "One for me," she said, placing one on Mara's desk, "and one for whoever is making that face." Mara blinked. What face? Lena sat on the edge of the desk and made a rough imitation of thoughtful despair. Mara laughed despite herself. "Family stuff," she said. Lena nodded. Ah. Not prying, just understanding. Mara hesitated, then said, "Do you ever feel like certain people can pull you into a version of yourself you thought you'd outgrown?" Lena took a sip. "Every Thanksgiving." Mara smiled. Then Lena added more seriously, "Some people don't need to say much. They just hit a note you've heard too many times." That landed. "A note," Mara repeated. "Yeah," Lena said. "Not a new song. Just the same old note that makes your nervous system rush to harmonize." Mara sat back. "That's exactly it." Lena shrugged. "My mother can still make me feel 12 with one sigh." They both laughed. But underneath it, Mara felt the truth of something settling deeper. Echo loops weren't always dramatic. Sometimes they were built from tone, timing, facial expressions, silences. The exact way someone said your name. The body remembered before the intellect did. That's why it was so hard to catch. That afternoon, her sister texted, "Mom called you, didn't she?" Mara looked at the screen for a long second, then typed, "Yes, she did." 3 dots appeared immediately. "I figured." Mara waited. Then came another message. "Sorry." That word, sorry. As if her feelings had already become an inconvenience. As if she had stepped into the same loop from the other side. Mara wrote back carefully, "You don't have to apologize. Want to talk later?" A longer pause this time. Then, "Maybe. I'm just tired." Mara could feel the pull, the old reflex to rush in, to ask 10 careful questions, to make herself available in that wide open, boundaryless way she had once mistaken for love. Instead, she wrote, "Okay, I'm here if you want me. No pressure." She stared at the message before sending it. It felt almost too simple, too clean. And yet something in her knew that simplicity was not cruelty. It was clarity. She hit send. At 2:40, Mara took her notebook to the little park behind the office again. The bench was damp from an earlier drizzle, so she wiped it with a napkin and sat carefully on one edge. She closed her eyes and pictured the hallway. Only now, instead of doors, she imagined speakers mounted above them. Old phrases looping softly through the walls. "Don't upset her. You should know what to do. It's easier if you're the calm one. If someone's hurting, you don't get to rest yet." She listened, not to obey, just to hear. That was the strange mercy of naming something. Once it had a shape, it lost some of its magic. It became a pattern, and patterns can be interrupted. She asked herself another question. What would it feel like not to answer every echo? The answer didn't come in words. It came as a sensation. More space in her chest. More air in the room. A version of love that didn't cost her her footing. She opened her eyes and wrote, Care is not the same as carrying. Understanding is not the same as entering the loop. I can stay near the pain without becoming the container for it. She read the lines twice, then tucked the notebook back into her bag. At 5:18, after work, Mara was halfway through the rinsing rice in a colander when her phone rang. Elise. Mara dried one hand on a dish towel and answered. Hey. A pause. Then Elise's voice, quieter than usual. Hey. Not brittle, not dramatic, just tired. Mara leaned against the counter. I'm glad you called. Another pause. Then Elise laughed once, softly. Of course Mom called you. Mara smiled. She did. Sorry. There's that word again. Elise sighed. I know. For a few moments, neither of them said much. And strangely, it didn't feel strained. Just honest. Finally, Mara asked, Do you want to tell me what's going on? A chair creaked on Elise's end of the line. Then, I don't know. I feel like I can't breathe in this place anymore. Mara let the words sit. Didn't jump in to solve. Didn't immediately interpret. Didn't say, Have you tried? Or, maybe you should. She just said, That sounds like a lot. Elise let out a long breath. Yeah. Another pause. Then, I keep thinking maybe if I leave, I'll feel different. Mara looked at the sink, the water droplets still clinging to the steel, the rice waiting patiently in the colander. The old impulse came back for 1 second. Tell her not to do anything rash. Tell her to stay. Tell her to think it through. Be the reasonable one. But instead, Mara stayed on her line. What do you think you're really wanting? She asked gently. To leave or to feel different? Silence. Then Elise said, almost in a whisper, Maybe both. The honesty of it moved something in Mara. This wasn't drama. It was fatigue trying to explain itself. They talked for nearly 20 minutes. Not in circles. Not in that old emotional spiral where Mara became the manager of everyone's feelings. Just two sisters, one tired, one listening. At the very end, Elise's voice changed, shifted, like she had remembered something halfway through standing up. Oh, she said, there's something else. Mara straightened slightly. What? Another pause. Then Elise said in a tone Mara couldn't quite place. Not fear, not excitement, but something very close to awe. You won't believe what I found. And before Mara could answer, the line went dead, to be continued.